Today we are transforming cities to become more sustainable. Colin Fudge is Professor of Urban Futures and Design at Chalmers University, Global Advisor to the United Nations and Chair of Beyond 2020 International Advisory Board. Why are we trying to make cities sustainable?
I think the first thing that we have to understand is that there's been enormous growth in the urban population of the world in the recent times. So in the 50s, there was only 30% of the world's population lived in cities. Now, 2019, it's probably 55% live in cities. And by 2050, it's 70% live in cities. So there's been this enormous explosion of rural to urban populations. And so that makes one reason why we need to concentrate on cities. I think the second reason is that cities are also one of the biggest producers of CO2 emissions. So the climate change debate is around trying to reduce those emissions, but cities are one of the biggest producers. At the same time, about 60 to 70% of the GDP of the world is made in cities. So we've got this kind of tension between both an environmental future for the planet and an economic future of the planet contained in one place, the city. So that's quite a tricky discussion and debate, and why we need more sustainable cities. I think the other third dimension of this is cities is where most people are now living. So we've also got to create out of this economic and environmental kind of focus, we've got to create really healthy places for people to live the whole of their lives, from being babies and growing up to being increasingly lots of old people. So it's those three things that come together in terms of the reasons why we've got to try and make cities more sustainable.
What are some of the key steps that we need to make to start to achieve sustainable cities?
Well, perhaps there's lots of different reasons why you need to do things, and there's a long list. But perhaps some of the key ones, I think perhaps the first thing to say is that it's not just about dealing with cities, it's also dealing with the way we live. So in a sense, we have to change the way we live as well as changing the way the city is. And those two things have got to come together. And that's quite a crucial first step, but a very difficult one. Because I think one of the characteristics about this is change. And in some ways, urgent change. And that means changing your life, but it also means changing the life of the city. So in a sense, there's all these issues around how we change the emissions, how we change the transport systems, how we stop losing energy out of buildings. All those kind of things are important. But in the end, I think it's fundamentally about change of ourselves and the city.
Beyond 2020 seems to be the best forum for this type of discussions around sustainable cities and communities. Who would you invite and why should they come?
I think there's lots of different kinds of actors and stakeholders you would expect to be at this kind of conference. And in a sense, they will have been at the previous conference 3 years ago, and they'll probably be at the next conference 3 years hence. So those kind of people that are involved in the built environment or in the industries related to the built environment, and the professionals that are around that, politicians, you would expect those to be there. But I think we need another dimension to this. And whilst I've got lots of different ideas, I think the focus is on young people. So I think, this young Swedish woman, Greta Thunberg, she's made quite a difference just by her own actions, and that's spread all over the world. And in a sense, I think, who do we need at this conference? We need young people. We need the young voice at this conference, because in a sense, this conference is also about their future, perhaps more than it is about my future. And so, in a sense, I'm just going to leave it with, we need the young people's voice at this conference.